4
from
weeks.
tomorrow, we started.
What about that?
So we passed about 60 families at our fundraising, and he'll be assigned a class as soon as the Facebook sends their money over, but with more than enough, and the extra will go to help another family.
Great, great.
So we're just...
Can't believe it, can you? Yeah. We'll get started. I don't know where my light dimmer's at, but he's not back there this evening. So am I on? Can you hear me? Does it need to be a little louder? Can you hear me now? A little louder still? How is it? More? Just a little bit more, Wes, just a little bit more if you can. It's not ringing in my ears yet, so it has to not be loud enough. How about now? Can you hear me? Is it all right? I think it's echoing. Yeah, there we go. Thank you, Wes. Glad everybody's out tonight. Appreciate your coming, and we'll be studying in Mark again this evening. We do have a few announcements we want to make, and then we'll see what you all have. Had an announcement. Debbie gave me that Marty's mom, Jean, had a mild stroke while she was in Nashville. They put a stent in her carotid artery that was 70% blocked. Her speech is normal. It's affected her right arm and leg. It says the next step will be to get her back in rehab, in a rehab facility in Ohio. So she's got to get from Nashville to Ohio, and hopefully that'll be a good trip for her. And they know when, Sharon? Okay, this weekend maybe they'll get to move her. So let's keep Marty's mom in our prayers. April also told me that they've been working on getting a service dog for Levi, and they've got the money. And she said it came just a few days shy of a month that they got the money for the dog, and that's unreal. I think they passed several people on the way. They collected their money a lot quicker, so they're thankful for that. We're thankful for that, and I think he's going to start some classes. Levi will start some classes here shortly also, so let's keep them in our prayers, and hopefully this will give Wes and April a little bit of relief, and they won't need to worry as much about Levi as they have been. Other announcements tonight. Jerry's cousin, Ronnie Power, passed away, and the funeral graveside is tomorrow. So keep that family in your prayers. Are there others? Continue to remember Faye Donaldson in her prayers. She's having a rough time. Betty Congleton, remember her. She's also continuing to have a hard time. Anybody else? Yes, Edgar. Kenny. Okay, so he's had quite a rough time. Okay, so let's continue. And where's he? King's Daughters. Okay. Are there others that need our prayers? Ronnie Davari. I heard yesterday he was doing a little better, they thought. Want to continue to remember him. I hadn't heard anything today. He did have surgery today. Okay. He was the one that was getting off a tractor on Kidville Road and was hit by a car, and in pretty bad shape. Had a lot of serious injuries. Others? Yes.
Brother Randy finally went to the doctor. His leg is broken between his ankle and his knee. I don't know where it's at.
Okay. Okay. We'll continue to.
He walked 8 miles and then he went to the doctor. His leg was broken.
I don't know about him. Remember Randy, I don't know what kind of help he needs, but that he's out there. He can hear me, I know. But I want to continue to remember him, and hopefully he heals quickly. Sometimes a broken leg is hard to get over, especially if you keep walking on it, ain't it, Jerry? But let's continue to remember Randy in our prayers. Are there others? Okay. Your granddaughter, Sarah, has been having a lot of stomach problems. So let's remember her. She having seen the doctor for that. Okay. Okay. Let's remember Sarah then in her prayers also. Okay. If there's nobody else, Tom, would you mind to lead us in a prayer? Amen. We'll be in Mark chapter 5, starting in verse 21 and going through 43. And I'll read that tonight to kind of prepare our minds for what we'll be talking about. It says, "Now when Jesus had crossed over again by boat to the other side, a great multitude gathered to him, and he was by the sea. And behold, one of the rulers of the synagogue came, Jairus by name, and when he saw him, he fell at his feet and begged him earnestly, saying, 'My little daughter lies at the point of death. Come and lay your hands on her, so she may be healed, and she will live.' So Jesus went with him, and a great multitude followed him and thronged him. Now a certain woman had a flow of blood 12 years, and had suffered many things from many physicians. And she had spent all that she had, and was no better, but rather grew worse. When she heard about Jesus, she came behind him. Come behind him in the crowd and touched his garment. For she said, 'If only I may touch his clothes, I shall be made well.' Immediately the fountain of her blood was dried up, and she felt in her body that she was healed of the affliction. And Jesus, immediately knowing in himself that power had gone out of him, turned around in the crowd and said, "Who touched my clothes?" But his disciples said to him, "You see the multitude thronging you, and you say, 'Who touched me?'" And he looked around to see who had done this thing. But the woman, fearing and trembling, knowing what had happened to her, came and fell down before him and told him the whole truth. And he said to her, "Daughter, your faith has made you well. Go in peace and be healed of your affliction." While he was still speaking, some came from the ruler of the synagogue's house, who said, "Your daughter is dead. Why trouble the teacher any further?" As soon as Jesus heard the word that was spoken, he said to the ruler of the synagogue, "Do not be afraid, only believe." And he permitted no one to follow him except Peter, James, and John, the brother of James. Then he came to the house of the ruler of the synagogue and saw a tumult and those who wept and wailed loudly. When he came in, he said to them, "Why make this commotion and weep? The child is not dead, but sleeping." And they ridiculed him. But when he had put them all outside, he took the father and the mother of the child and those who were with him and entered where the child was lying. Then he took the child by the hand and said to her, "Talitha cuma," which is translated, "Little girl, I say to you, arise." Immediately the girl arose and walked, for she was 12 years of age, and they were overcome with great amazement. But he commanded them strictly that no one should know it, and said that something should be given her to eat. When you read that, it seems like all that must have happened just, and it may have, I don't know, but it went quick, and a lot of things happened, and I think that's Mark's way of telling things too. We've said that he's direct and to the point, and Mark here has gone through a lot for us to cover tonight, and we're going to kind of just have a little bit of introduction and kind of back up and cover a few things over, but what was Jesus' main reason for performing miracles?
So that people would realize that he was the Son of God.
Yeah. Is that okay? So he would realize that he was the Son of God, and that's right. That was his main goal, wasn't it? In coming, that was his main goal. We see clearly that was his goal when we look back in Mark, and we'll turn there for just a minute. Looking back in Mark chapter 2. That was his main goal, was to prove who he was and to let them know that he was the Son of God. Mark chapter 2, it says, the scribes there, they had questioned, after he healed this man, they questioned him of what he said about forgiveness of sins. In chapter 2 and starting in verse 8, it says, "But immediately when Jesus perceived in his spirit that they reasoned thus within themselves, he said to them, 'Why do you reason about these things in your heart? Which is it easier to say to the paralytic, your sins are forgiven you, or to say, arise, take your bed, and walk? But that you may know that the Son of Man has power on earth to forgive sins, he said to the paralytic, I say to you, arise and take up your bed and go to your house.'" So here Jesus, we see, if he can do these miracles the way he done them, if he can do all these different things that he's done, and we'll talk about those a little later, he has the power to forgive sins also, don't he? Because he is the Son of God. In today's lesson, we see two more miracles take place after the demon possession when Jesus crossed across the sea to the western side. It says, when he arrived, one of the rulers of the synagogue named Jairus fell at Jesus' feet. And then, just as soon as this happened, he's on his way to Jairus' house. And while he was traveling there, a woman who had a flow of blood for 12 years touched Jesus' garment as he passed through a dense crowd. I thought it was kind of interesting. There are some parallels here in these two miracles. Both of these that were healed by Jesus' touch were females. They were both ladies, girls, or one of them was a girl and one of them was a woman. Both are called daughter. He calls them both daughter. The woman's illness had lasted 12 years, and the little girl's age was 12. He was rebuked for both of these miracles, we see. He was rebuked in verse 31. It says his disciples said, you see the multitude thronging, and you say, who touched me? With the woman that had the issue of blood. And then in verse 40, we see that he was ridiculed by the people when he was going in to see Jairus' daughter. In both stories, Jesus came in contact with uncleanliness according to the old law. The woman who had a hemorrhage of blood and a corpse, which neither one is a Jew supposed to come in contact with without being unclean. But again, we remember Jesus' power. We remember he could control storms, cast out demons, heal the sick, and raise the dead. So this was all a part of the plan to prove who Jesus was. As they crossed the sea after the healing of the demon-possessed man, there's a crowd waiting in verse 21. In verse 22 tells us of the ruler of the synagogue coming and telling him his daughter is at the point of death. He said, come and lay your hands on her, and she may be healed. Is this the only time that somebody's come? I mean, just in Mark, we can look at a couple of more incidences when somebody's come for their child. It's not, it's a child, and if anybody's going to get to our heart, as Tom was talking today in his prayer, a child will get to us, won't they? We have compassion on a child. We hate to see a child sick. We hate to see a child hurt in any way. But we have a couple of more accounts. There's an account in Mark 9, verses 14 through 29, when a father comes and says, but if you can do anything, have compassion on us and help us. And this was a demon that the disciples couldn't cast out. This was a demon that they had trouble with, and Christ, he was wanting Christ to come and cast this demon out of this child. Also, we see in Mark 7, verses 24 through 30, and this was a Gentile woman, and she had come and wanted him to come and help her daughter. And we remember this one because he said, we can't feed the dogs before we do the children of Israel. And she said, well, even the dogs get the crumbs. So he did help her. We remember how he helped her, the demon possession, her daughter. What about Jairus? What strikes you as interesting here? He's one that would you expect him to come and fall at Jesus' feet? Of all the things that we see where Jesus has been dealing with these rulers, did very many of them come, and very few would fall at Jesus' feet, would they?
You know, I thought it was interesting. Jesus, and under the law, they couldn't touch dead people, and if they did, they had to go through a ritual that had to be completed in order to get clean from it. But before they looked at Jesus and said, well, she's dead. And he said, no, she's sleeping.
Yeah.
Now, a sleeping person you can touch, but a dead person you could touch. She was asleep, all right. She was dead.
She was dead. Yeah.
But Jesus referred to her as being asleep so that he was not subjected to the uncleanliness. Now, the woman with the blood problem, she slipped through the crowd and said, if I can only touch his garment, touch the hem of his garment, then I will be healed. And sure enough, she was healed.
She was healed, wasn't she?
Okay, but with what she had, she was considered unclean.
Yes.
And, you know, that's how probably was avoided a scene of the people. And the Bible says that she wasn't, maybe somebody that knew her real good may do what was wrong with her.
Yes.
But anyway, that's how he got over from the accusations of those that were skeptical and looking at him as though he was not the Son of God. Mm-hmm. So that's what I thought about it.
Yeah, it's very interesting. Jairus is amazing to me. Of course, I think all of us have had probably sick children, and you lose your pride if you have pride, if that's standing in your way. And here he showed that he didn't let pride get in his way, even though he was a ruler in this synagogue. Pride, as far as being a ruler, he knew what it took to make his daughter well. And his daughter wasn't going to get well other than Christ, because we see evidently she was sick and almost dead when he went to Christ. So, did he lack any faith?
Jesus told him to believe.
Yeah. He didn't lack faith when he come to him, though, did he? I mean, he had the faith that he needed.
Well, a lot of them thought that if you were dead, then even if you had faith, there was no coming back. That's the way they looked.
Yeah. They didn't know that he could raise from the dead, raise people. Yeah. He was clear in verse 23. He said, if you'll just come and touch my daughter, she will live. If you'll just touch my daughter, she will live. We see in verse 24 that he went. He said, I'll go. And he went with him. No hesitation. And we notice also the multitude all came around him. It seems the story here now is about to change. I mean, we're headed to Jairus' house, and the whole multitude evidently is around him, coming, gathering around him. And it says in verse 25 and 26, that, like I say, there's a woman that comes into the picture. This woman was desperate. This woman was at the end of her rope. She had tried everything she could think of to be healed. She had went to the physicians. They had done many things to her, it says, and no telling what they had done to her to try to make her better, and she'd only gotten worse. And they charged her.
Even though they couldn't fix it.
Even
They took all her money.
some things don't change, do they? But she was at the end of her rope. I think we would say. She had tried all things that she knew of to be better. She had no hope of talking to Jesus, it seems. Women were considered second-class citizens to start with. As been said, she had a flow of blood, so she needed to stay away from people. She was unclean. But she slipped in and hoped just to be able to touch the hem of his garment and be healed. When she touched him, two things happened. What was the two things? She was healed. One thing, yeah, and Jesus knew it. It says immediately the blood was dried up, and she felt in her body that she was healed of this affliction. Second, we see Jesus saying, "Who touched me?" And that would be like me walking downtown Court Day on Saturday afternoon on a real sunny day, and if Jerry's with me, I say, "Well, who touched me, Jerry?" And he's like, "Well, you're crazy. What do you mean? What do you mean, who touched me?" And Christ knew this. He felt this come out of him, didn't he? He knew he was healed. Knew he had been. Knew she had been healed. Jesus turned in verse 32, and he saw who had touched him. Then also in 33, he gave the woman the opportunity to explain what she had done. Now, this woman was afraid. She was too afraid to come to him and talk to him face to face. She was fearful. But what did she know? Yeah, he had the power, didn't he? He had the power to heal her. What happens to us a lot of times? We get too afraid and we don't do something, don't we? Well, I'm afraid I can't do it. I've got to get out. I can't do it. Like me teaching a class, maybe. I don't know. Sometimes I feel like I'm afraid and I can't do it. But she had faith. She was fearful, but she was also faithful. And her faith overcome her fear. And Jesus said, "Daughter, your faith has made you well. Go in peace and be healed." How quick did this take place? She was healed immediately. Now, I don't know how long they had been moving or what. The way Mark tells it, it seems like it's just... And I don't know how you would even keep up with what had gone on here.
One of the evidences that the Bible is not written by mere men, that it's inspired by the Holy Spirit, is the brevity of these accounts. You and I couldn't tell it. It would take, you know how wordy I am. It would take me 6 months to tell it.
Yeah.
So, at least 6 hours.
Yeah.
And Mark tells it in a few verses. The Holy Spirit guided him to do it that way, and that was his style.
It was. But like you say, even in other places we see...
It didn't take Luke long to tell it, and he
No.
was more wordy. His chapters sometimes were 70 verses long.
Yeah.
But it didn't take him long to tell that same story.
No.
Because the Holy Spirit told him how to do it.
It didn't take long, and like you say, if we were to tell something like this, if we were to tell these two stories, well, it would just...
You sure wouldn't want Harrison to tell it.
Jairus is then while he was standing there talking to the woman, and like I say here, it moves again. Somebody else? Yes.
I was just going to say, I think it's so powerful too, these stories are told back to back because they're so opposite. You know, you got the man ruler, you got the woman who's unclean, and yet he stops to help both of them.
Yes.
And that is powerful because, I mean, she was considered very low, and he said, "You matter."
Yeah.
You know, and people saw that.
Yes. He could have kept going, not even knowing that had happened and not said anything, but yes. That is amazing that no matter where you're at on the social status, Christ cared, didn't he? He cared. And that's the way the gospel is today. No matter where you're at, he cares. And we need him. We don't always have the miracles happening, but sins forgiven, we all need him. We all need him. While he was still talking to the woman, a messenger came from Jairus' house in verse 35 and reported his daughter's death. And he said, Why trouble the teacher any further? Because his daughter was dead. Jesus heard that, didn't he? In verse 36, and he turned to encourage Jairus. And he said, Don't be afraid, only believe. I can't even imagine what you would feel as a father at that time. But you would have to feel some relief if you had that faith when Jesus said, Don't be afraid, only believe.
Well, he had just saw the woman healed. Jairus had just saw the woman healed when Jesus told her, that she was healed.
Yeah, he had seen that.
He had just seen that. And Jesus, you had just seen that, and Jesus looked at you and said, Just believe, just believe. Yeah. And you would say, Well, sure I believe. I just saw a miracle. I will believe. So
we believe in,
that made his faith. That added to his faith.
We would believe, but in the back of this is me, I would probably been like Mary and Martha. I would have said, if you'd have only been here. You healed this woman. If you just kept going, we might have made it. We might have been. But, we're not told. Evidently, he still believed because he didn't say, no, don't worry about it, she's gone. He said, okay, let's go. He was ready. But I think sometimes putting our faith, his faith had to be tested there, wasn't it? It was tested.
It's interesting. He was concerned with bothering the teacher. After he found out
Yes.
he was dead, he said, let's just don't bother him.
Don't bother the teacher. Yeah.
Jesus said, it wasn't bothering Jesus.
No. He knew what was happening, didn't he? He knew what was. When Jesus went, and this girl was dead. Jairus' daughter was dead. And he only took Peter, James, and John to the ruler's house. And when he got there, they had already started mourning and wailing and weeping loudly, it says. As we were talking here a minute ago, this man was widely known, wasn't he? A lot of people knew him, and a lot of people were waiting, I'm sure, and because they knew she was sick, nigh to death. And they were there, and they were mourning at this time. And the book that we've been studying said they had professional mourners that would come, and they would kind of get things going. They would get things stirred up and get things loud, and mourning. They would just come to kind of get the process going, I guess. And they had the crowd stirred up, didn't they? Jesus dismissed the crowd. He sent them home, and he told, she's sleeping. And he took the father and the mother and those that were with him into where the child was at. And he took the girl by the hand, and he commanded, said, "Little girl, I say to you, arise." And at Jesus' powerful words, she arose and walked. What about Jairus' faith? It wasn't misplaced in Jesus, was it? Not only could he heal the sick as he did the woman with the issue of blood, not only could he heal the sick, cast out demons, not only could he calm the storm, but he could raise the dead. This is a true sign that he was the Son of God, wasn't it? He was of God. He was part of the Godhead.
You think it was part of the plan for Peter, James, and John to see this? He let Peter, James, and John and the parents were the only ones allowed to go in.
Yes.
But I believe that's all by design. I don't believe any of that is happenstance.
No.
I think Peter, James, and John needed to see this for future reference.
Yes.
When they were out preaching and writing and all that, they were eyewitnesses to this stuff. And I think they were in there for a reason.
I do. I think they were definitely in for a reason. They were there to see this, like you say, to increase their faith for sure, and to know that he was who he said he was. Even they had trouble, didn't they, at times, believing who he was.
When they were being persecuted for preaching his name, they said, we don't preach in his name. They said, well, we have to.
Yeah.
No, it's a fact. We've seen it.
Yeah. They didn't have a choice, did they? They had to do it.
So they became witnesses.
Yes.
They became witnesses.
They seen this, didn't they? Firsthand. They seen what had happened. He gave them strict orders not to repeat it. That one's a little, because all those people, that mourners, when this little girl come outside and started playing, I'm just,
You didn't have to say anything.
no.
They see her,
They knew, didn't they? Jesus' miraculous ability did not escape notice during his earthly ministry. He could tell them, don't say, but like say, it didn't escape. It couldn't escape. Jesus stressed the important role of his miracles that it played. There in John chapter 14, and we'll read that, verses 10 and 11. Do you not believe that I am in the Father, and the Father in me? The words that I speak to you, I do not speak on my own authority, but the Father who dwells in me does the works. Believe me that I am in the Father, and the Father in me, or else believe me for the sake of the works themselves. Jerry was talking about Peter, James, and John. I wonder if this was in Peter's mind in Acts chapter 2, in verse 22. Because he said in Acts 2 and 22, it says, Men of Israel, hear these words. Jesus of Nazareth, a man attested by God to you by miracles, wonders, and signs, which God did through him in your midst, as you yourselves also know. They had killed Christ at this time, and he said, you know he did these things. You know he did these miracles, that he healed people from the dead. You know these things.
And when John wrote his first epistle, 1 John, he said, talking about Jesus, he said, that which was from the beginning, which we've heard, we've seen with our eyes, we've looked upon, and our hands have touched, concerning the word of life. In verse 3, that which we have seen and heard, we declare to you. So it was valuable for him to be there.
Yes.
Later on, when he was preaching and writing, he could say, I saw it. I was
Yeah.
there. And that makes all the difference sometimes.
Well, it would. I mean, if you were a witness of these things, if you were if you were there and you seen these things, you seen, I mean, you go in and you know this little girl was dead.
It's like the resurrection. Paul said over 500 people saw it at once, saw him at once.
Yeah.
Well,
That's
that's one of the reasons I believe it.
yeah.
One
Yeah.
of the reasons, not the only one, but
Yeah.
all those people couldn't be mistaken.
No. No. That's the reason people benefited from the miracles, no doubt, no doubt. People benefited greatly from the miracles. But the reason for the miracles was to show those and to set it in stone that this is the Christ, the Son of God.
And that he was flesh and blood. He had come to earth as a man. He was flesh
Yes.
and blood. And they had looked upon Jesus Christ, God on earth.
Yep.
And they had seen it.
They had seen it. And they still turned away, didn't they? He wipes their sins out with that blood, don't he? Any other comments? Tom?
You talked about Jared's faith, and he had great faith in Jesus. Whatever Jesus asked him to do, he was ready to do it. Jesus knew that he was going to ever raise this little girl from the dead. Now we go back to read, where you read in John 14. Let's read that. Let not your heart be troubled. You believe in God, believe you also in me. In my Father's house are many mansions. If not so, I would have told you. I go to prepare a place for you. If I go to prepare a place for you, I will come again to receive you unto myself, where I am, there you may be also.
Faith. That's right.
And the same faith of God.
Yep. And that's faith, isn't it? That is faith. Thank you all for your attention. Appreciate it. I get that, Tom.
I got it, brother. Thank you, brother. Good lesson.
Thank you. Appreciate it.